Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the chance to be here with you at the CIO 200 Pakistan today. My name is Ahmad Al Abadi. I'm a regional sales manager with Infoblox, and I look after the UAE, Levant, and Pakistan region. Today, we're going to be discussing rather an interesting topic, a zero-trust DDI model. We're going to be trying to demystify the concept for a world-class, compelling infrastructure security. On the agenda today, we have three main topics. Why zero trust? And with the help of my colleague, Mohammed Tabbara, we kind of put together an airport traveling experience where we're going to be trying to demystify the concept and relevance to what you go through in the airport from a zero trust perspective. And we're going to see that in the coming slide. Now, why now? We're going to talk about market trends, borderless networks, the dissolving of our perimeters as organizations. Our users are everywhere, working from home, working from public networks. And then what today's security challenges comes with that. And finally, we'll talk about what is a zero trust DDI. Now, for those who does not know Infoblox is a world-class secure DDI solution provider that works with thousands of clients around the world, helping them in their journey into digital. Proudly, Infoblox products and technology is a core element of what is called zero trust cybersecurity architecture. And in the coming slide, we're going to work together to see how is that exactly. First question, why zero trust in the first place? We all agree that security is a must, and therefore we should never trust and always verify. Now to the fun part of our presentation today. Here we look at zero trust travel experience, that we're all familiar with. On the left-hand side is the airport security zero trust model. On the right-hand side is a cybersecurity zero trust model. When you go to the airport for a travel and you want to get from one destination to another, no one in that entire process completely trusts you. You have to prove that you are who you say you are. And you kind of earn that trust gradually as you move throughout the process. So this is where you start with airline counter. You go there, you provide, travel documents, you provide your booking, perhaps nowadays a negative PCR test. They check your bags and the weight of these bags. And if you comply with everything and everything is okay, then you're good to go to the next step. Similarly, in a zero trust model, we validate users and devices. We have to make sure that users and devices connect to our network is exactly who they say they are. And that they comply with the organization policy in place. Now, once, let's say we're done with that in the airport, you go into the passport control and clearance. That's where an officer would check your travel document, would make sure that, for example, you're not a travel risk, and that your document is okay, is valid, and you're basically okay to move on to the next area of the airport, perhaps a duty-free, etc. Now, similarly, in a zero trust model, there is the control and minimize application access. So just because you are a legit user does not mean that you get to access anything in that network or all the applications that it provides. Similarly, in the airport, just because you're a legit traveler, it does not mean that you get to go anywhere in the airport. Now, let's say you got cleared. Now you get to the next step of the travel experience, which is a security checkpoint screening. That's perhaps one of the most important and crucial elements of the airport's zero trust security model. That's where it gets screened, through your body system. If you hold anything, that's not allowed, maybe metal devices, etc. Your carry-on luggage gets checked as well. If you're carrying any, unallowed items with you there, and basically to make sure that you're okay to access the remaining or the next part of your travel journey. Now, in a zero trust model, that's where the foundational security comes in. That's where things like DNS firewall, next generation firewall, proxy, vulnerability scanner, and other tools and solutions are in place to make sure that the data is going through, or the traffic is going through the network or the organization, is compliant with some essential policy that's in place. Now, you've done that. While you're going through that process, your baggage that you checked in the first, counter is also being screened before they get on board the aircraft. Similarly, in a zero trust model. In a zero trust model, the data has to be protected and screened, whether it's leaving the organization, whether the data is getting through the organization. In other words, whether data is being exfiltrated or is being infiltrated, it has to be checked and screened to make sure nothing confidential is leaving and nothing harmful basically is getting in. Let's move on. Now we get to the CCTV system, surveillance system. Okay, you're done with all these steps in the airport. Is nobody checking you after that? In fact, there's a big team of people that leverages things like human intelligence and human behavior analysis to look at every person and every traveler, part of the airport area. So those people, they leverage those systems to make sure that nobody has maybe malicious intention or somebody behaves not in accordance with the laws and the regulations. Similarly, again, in a zero trust model, there is the visibility logging and analytics, artificial intelligence, behavior analysis. All these things and all these tools are a core component for such architecture. Now we get to the boarding experience. This is where travelers get divided and segmented based perhaps on their travel class, maybe families, people with special needs. All these get segmented in the boarding area. And in a zero trust model, again, there is what's called a micro segmentation or micro segmented networks. And that is also, again, a very crucial and important part of how you can establish and apply a zero trust cybersecurity model. Now, during that time, the entire process that you are at the airport, there is the airport security police. Those are the people that are watching it over the entire process and ready to intervene in case of any incident that happens. This is your SOC team that leverages tools like the SIM and SOAR that would intervene and take action, the necessary measurements to remediate any malicious activities, perhaps quarantine infected devices, and response to incidents as they happen. Now, let's talk about why now. The answer is really simple. Networks now and today are borderless more than ever before. You can no longer say this is my perimeter and all the good things are inside and the bad stuff are kept outside. Let's look at the traditional architecture of any network. First, we see dedicated WAN circuits or MPLS that is used to connect all the offices and resources to applications in your data center and also to the internet. This by itself results in a poor user experience. And these deployments were difficult to manage as the network evolved and became more complex. This is what we used to see basically in networks, especially prior to the pandemic around the world. Any organization, started their journey into digital, you're going to see this kind of architecture dissolving and disappearing in the first phases of this journey. There's a lot of manual configurations that results in a lot of delays, and there is a lot of extended outages and downtimes because of that. And security being centralized in a data center, it contributes to the need to route all your traffic back to the data center, because all these branches and users, before they get anywhere else, whether accessing a SaaS application somewhere, accessing the internet, you want to make sure that all the security investment that you have done that in place applies on them. And that by itself results in a poor user experience. Now, to what we're seeing today happening with all the organizations flocking into digital. Cloud applications, SaaS applications are being leveraged. Technologies like SD-WAN, are in place. Users are working from home from everywhere in the world. There's the branches that you have, okay, is now connected direct to the internet using technology like SD-WAN. Organizations are kind of decentralizing their data centers, and things are being kind of pushed to the edge to adapt to this change that are we seeing. And then the bring your own devices, the IoT is also affecting this change. There's like non-standard devices that are increasingly becoming part of your network. You know, everybody using their own devices to connect to your applications and services from all over the world. And traditional data center applications are moving more and more and every day to the cloud to optimize the user experience. We've seen that happening massively with something like Office 365. In other words, like we said earlier, the perimeter is gone. Now that's where the security challenges are kicking in. How do you extend this investment that you have done and this security that you've done in your data center across all the edge networks, you know, and the users at home? These are the challenges that we see today in a security. And this is why now zero trust cybersecurity model is very important. First of all, there's an increased attack surface, and this has multiplied since the pandemic kicked in. And then there is siloed, an inefficient security architecture. You know, what that center can provide you in your headquarter cannot be extended to the users, you know, in your edge and all over the internet. And then your security teams, because of that, they're being overwhelmed with the amount of technologies that they have to deal with. There is inconsistent policies and solutions in place. Depends, you know, where the incident is happening. So what you can apply in your headquarter in a NAC solution perhaps cannot be extended to your edge and to your user at home. And all of that has led to poor scaling to the threat detection and remediation. How you deal with a threat for a working from home user is different for a user that is, or a device that is sitting in your headquarter with all the security tools that you have, you know, over there. How fast can you actually detect and quarantine infected devices with this kind of new architecture? Now, the question is, what is a similar kind of control plane that is, you know, existing across all these different networks, whether it's in your headquarter, your branch, your working from home user? And the answer is honestly DDI or DNS. And that is how our zero trust DDI model kicks in and comes into place. Let's see how. What is a zero trust DDI? Is a secure DDI deployment in a zero trust cybersecurity model. And we're gonna tell you how for organization today that is, you know, flocking into digital, that going through their digital transformation journey, it makes sense for them to consider a zero trust DDI architecture and how that becomes kind of a compelling mean for achieving those objectives. Back to the, you know, zero trust travel experience model, but now we're talking about it from Infoblox perspective. To demystify that, we're going to be boarding a flight with Infoblox Airlines on a first class ticket. Our destination is secure organizations, and the gate number is 53. And I'm sure we all know that 53 is in fact the port that DNS uses universally. Now, remember how part of zero trust model, there was the user validation and devices. You know, that's where you use things like the identity access management, dual factor authentication tools to verify users and devices. Along with the help of Infoblox DDNS and GSSS TSEG, you make sure that users, you know, are enrolled to the right and the primary DNS. They're being validated and presented with the Kerberos tickets, and that they belong to the domain they're trying to connect to. Similarly, a DHCP in a zero trust DDI model can leverage fingerprint information to verify the type of devices, you know, type of operating systems, and other fingerprint details to set policies to whether, you know, a device can connect to your network, you know, gets an IP address or not. And then the second is minimizing control, control and minimize application access. Remember how, you know, identifying in a zero trust model, how this is an important part of your, you know, mergers in place. Now with Infoblox threat intelligence feed that we provide you, millions of indicators of compromise that would allow you to check your users' destinations that they're trying to get to against those millions of indicators of compromise, and also based on certain categorization that you would set that will match your policy of the organization. For instance, you can set that I don't want my users to access any gaming sites, for instance. Those also can be enforced or be an enforcement measures using Infoblox ZeroTrust DDI model. Then there is the custom RPZs. That's where you can add your own whitelisted, blacklisted, custom IPs and domains to apply certain measures. And finally, what our threat investigation portal dossier can provide you from, I want to know what is this IP that I saw, part of my SIM reports. Who does it belong to? Who created a certain domain? What other domains is related to it? What is the industry saying about it? And all that's kind of rich information that you can get from our dossier platform. And then to the foundational security. Remember, we mentioned the next generation firewalls, proxies, etc. That's where the DNS firewall kicks in. A DNS firewall is a way to check against millions and millions of malicious destinations, malicious IPs, domains, and URLs. And not only that, I want to make sure that my DNS service itself, my DNS servers, in other words, are themselves being protected against things like cache poisoning, amplification, redirection kind of attacks. And then what happens to my users that are no longer sitting inside my premise? They're off premise, they're at home, they're working from somewhere public. That's where Infoblox blocks one endpoint can make sure that all the security measures that you are applying from a DNS security perspective are extended to your working from home users. And they're always, whether they're on your corporate VPN or not, they're always going to Infoblox Cloud Security to be safe and secure from destinations that they might be accessing on these public networks. Now, data protection as part of a zero trust cyber model comes in Infoblox by us helping you mitigate against things like data exfiltration and data infiltration. We want to make sure that data is being protected from being leaked. We want to make sure that your DNS today is not being leveraged to exfiltrate data, is not being leveraged to empower something like fileless malware, where the malware will be calling back the remaining of it using your DNS responses. And that's where behavior analysis from Infoblox kicks in to mitigate against that. To the visibility part, logging analytics, that's where our machine learning and behavior analysis engine sitting in your DNS can mitigate from things like DGAs, domain generation algorithms, fast flux. Those are kind of zero-day attacks that happens every day. And reputation only will not help you mitigate them. And that's where the behavior analytics that comes in and Infoblox can mitigate those. And after all of that is being identified, you use advanced IPAM to pinpoint for you from visibility perspective, pinpointing for you, where is the infected device? Who's the users using it? Where does it exist in your network? Which floor, which switch port, etc. And now the segmentation. Remember how we spoke about segmentation earlier being part of your zero trust model? DNS and network views is what Infoblox can help you to segment your DNS services. And therefore, users would only be accessing what they need to access from DNS service perspective. There is security policies in place and access lists. And there is also what's called the DNS traffic controller. That's Infoblox terminology for a GSLB. You want to provide your users with the service based on perhaps their geographical location, based on, from which data center they're connecting with you, and based on maybe certain policies and load balancing measures that you have in place. And finally, we're going to be looking at the SIM and SOAR. That is where your SOC team are leveraging things like SIM products to take certain actions and respond to incidents. Infoblox can power that with our ecosystem integration. You want to try to automate your incident response. You want to try to automate how you remediate threats. And that's where us working with your existing cybersecurity architecture, we can help you achieve that. Whether it is by talking to a next generation firewall to create an access list on the fly, whether it is to talk to a vulnerability scanner to initiate a certain action or an ACK product, etc. And not only that, with the help of Tide, which is our threat intelligence data exchange, we can share all that intelligence that we have with your other cybersecurity tools in place. And with all that, it can help you to enforce, DNS policies according to what your organization would set them to be. Now, finally, I'm almost done. I just would like to advise everyone to go to infoblox.com/cyber-threat-intelligence. This is a weekly report that we publish, usually every week. And in it, we would share with you what we have generated by our threat intelligence team about information related to latest attacks, how they work, best practices to mitigate them, and basically keep you up to date with the trends and the threats that we see. I'm done with my slides. I hope this was informative for everyone. And I would like to thank you again for giving me the chance to be with you here today. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time to discuss our topic today in more details. Thanks a lot and have a good day, everyone.